So this is the first time that we do this as a YouTube video first, as well as an Instagram live. This is the second part of the series, and I've got one of my cats coming through who is very interested in being part of this, obviously. Okay, so what we're doing is this is a 365-day challenge for me, and hopefully it will give a lot of value to you. What we're planning on doing is we're going to have a different kind of topic every day of the week. So yesterday it started with a spiritual topic, and my little kitty here has her paws hung up. With a spiritual topic, today is non-violence, and I'll get to what exactly we mean with that shortly. And tomorrow will be funny animal stories, which then lead to everything under this umbrella is going to be under the umbrella of win-win situations between humans and animals and humans and nature. And on Wednesdays, we've got a wild card, whatever comes up. On Thursdays, we will explore win-win tech. On Fridays, the best of the week. And on Saturdays is free. And then it starts with some spiritual topics again on Sunday. So let's see how that works. I was planning on doing this for the rest of the year. So I hope that, because we've got a lot of good things and a lot of interesting things that we just wanted to share with you as well. I have shared them on LinkedIn quite a bit, but not on other platforms. And I think some of these things are really, really worth mentioning and bringing to a wider audience. So that's what we want to do. So today it is non-violence. How this came about is I have recorded a pet course, which is basically how to love and protect your pets without feeling the constant need to apologize, which a lot of us do. It is available at www.nevelle.co.uk/mastermind-pets, pets/pets-pets. I don't know, what is this little thingy, dash or slash? I can never remember. I'm German, so English isn't my mother language. Anyway, so I will post the links in the YouTube video. It's going to be underneath here shortly when I've edited this and put it on YouTube on the time. Usually we will do this. We will publish this on YouTube at 8:30 Central Eastern Time every day, except for Saturdays, obviously. And the second strategy in this pets course is how to stand your ground. And the whole course is not about nonviolence. It is basically on how to head off any kind of issues you may have with your pet if you're moving or with your neighbors or whatever before they even arise. Because a lot of us are very good at it. Some of us may have been good at some point, but then kind of got intimidated by someone and then went into a pattern of behavior that is unhelpful without us actually necessarily realizing it. I know it for me, that happened to me. I used to be very outgoing, and then I got bullied quite a bit, and then all of a sudden I was withdrawing, and I didn't realize that I was actually inviting trouble in. So there are a lot of strategies of how not to do that and how to actually make sure that wherever you go, you're going to have a happy experience, not unlike what my little boy down there has. So how to love and protect your pets without feeling the constant need to apologize. However, as I said, the second strategy is basically how to stand up to bullies, but I only have a very rudimentary strategy in there because usually you don't need that much. Usually people who are bullies don't really realize that they are doing it, and they are not really psychopaths or anything. And what I put into the course is enough, but also I didn't want to put the entire topic of nonviolence into the course because it would have completely overwhelmed the course, and that was just supposed to be a little thing, a little side topic in that particular course, which was really about positive ways to head things off. But I also promised in the course that on Mondays I would explore the issue of nonviolence when it is actually needed, and that is what we do on Monday now. Now, this is not an exploration of how to stand up against authorities and the powers that be, just in case that some of my ex-colleagues may have been a little bit worried when they read that this is what I was going to be doing. I'm not planning on my own little revolt here. Obviously, I do have strong views with regards to factory farming and vivisection and so on and so forth, but I'm not an expert in how to stand up against that. I'm not an expert in nonviolent resistance on a large scale. There are people who are, who can talk to this much better. And also, I would not be able to serve the people that I want to serve if I get too uncomfortable with the powers that be here, because it's very, very easy to shut this down, right? And I want to serve the people basically who are normal people who want to protect their pets or want to protect some wildlife. So that, and there will be examples out of a book. Obviously, the book may use examples of violent regimes, for example, but of course you can't really use them one-to-one if you're not living in a dictatorship or in a violent regime, and you would have to adjust them. And as I said, I'm not an expert in that. I have not led any kind of political rallies or whatever. So there are much better people to explore this if you want to explore this further, right? So this is not what it's about. It is about what you can do, what you can take from these kinds of techniques in order to really head off violence or stand up against violence without using it yourself. Because a lot of times animal lovers either just put their head down and just watch those being hurt that they love, or at some point they get so frustrated that they become violent themselves, and that is exactly not what we want. That's what we want to head off. We want to give other options, right? So the book that we'll use, I'll introduce it in a second. This will be an introductory session. This will not be the first technique to use, but I just wanted to introduce the guy to you who wrote the book. And what is interesting is that he was endorsed by the Dalai Lama and by Mahatma Gandhi, but he also got a grant for research from a number of people including the US Department of Defense. So even those who specialize in war may see a value in using non-violence, because a lot of times it will put away with the need to have war, which is really in everybody's interest. So the book, and I will read a lot from the book itself. I've got it on my desktop here at the moment, just to make sure that I get this right. This is a book by the author Dean Sharp, and he's a senior scholar at the Albert Einstein Institute in Boston, or at least he was when he was writing this book. From 1965, he held research appointments in Harvard University Center for International Affairs for nearly 30 years. He's a professor emeritus of political science in the University of Massachusetts. He was called the Clausewitz of nonviolence warfare, or the Machiavelli of nonviolence. And he founded the Albert Einstein Institute in 1983 to promote research, policy studies, and education on the strategic uses of nonviolent struggle in face of dictatorship, war, genocide, and oppression. Obviously, we are hopefully not going to have that quite as much in our neighborhood, but that doesn't mean that we can't use some of the things that he researched just in a very, maybe in a watered down version, or just the idea of it, just as I explained in the course, in the Gurkha strategy. If you do take the course, and if you have taken the course, you know that the Gurkha strategy, what I propose there is very different from what a Gurkha would do, but it's still the same idea. The same idea applies and can actually work very, very well in a context that you would never think of warfare, that you would never think. It's just the idea, the energy behind it, right? So Sharp's The Power of Practice of Nonviolent Struggle, carried forward by the Dalai Lama, as I said. His first book, Gandhi Wields the Weapon of Moral Power, included a foreword by Albert Einstein. Sorry, it wasn't Mahatma Gandhi, it was Albert Einstein. An introduction by Bharatan Kumar Rappa. I hope I pronounced that right. So what it also says, which surprised me a little. Well, it surprised me and it didn't surprise me, because I used to, like a lot of Germans who romanticize about nonviolence, we always thought that, if you just talk about love and, have really good arguments, then that is going to work and then people are going to be nonviolent. Well, it basically says in here, exhortations in favor of love and nonviolence have made little or no contribution to ending war and major political violence. I'm not sure that that is completely correct. Maybe some energy work is maybe not considered in here, but what I do know is if you come over as a victim to somebody who really wants violence, it's not a good idea, right? Also, by mere advocacy of nonviolent alternatives will not necessarily produce any change either, unless they are accurately perceived as being at least as effective as violent alternatives. And the same thing goes for sermonizing declarations. Then what else does he say in his introduction? As acceptance of such Defense Department funds involved no restrictions whatsoever on research, writing, or dissemination of results, I willingly accepted them. As said, he did get a grant by the US Department of Defense. And what he says is, my hope is that this book will serve as a contribution to the beginning of new research, investigation, and development of effective nonviolent alternatives to domestic violence and international war. So he himself says this is not just about large-scale movements, it is also about domestic violence, which is a one-to-one thing oftentimes, right? And it is Gene Sharp, again, from the Harvard University Center for International Affairs. Now, I did a little bit of a summary of the methods of nonviolent action, and he calls it the political jujitsu, which I thought was quite interesting. So the most interesting bits I'll introduce to you. Nonviolent action works in very special ways, which must be grasped if the technique itself is to be understood. It is designed to operate against opponents who are able and willing to use violent sanctions. There is no assumption in this technique that the opponents will, when faced with nonviolent action, suddenly renounce violence, or even that they consistently restrict their use of violent repression. So that is one thing that I needed to learn as well. Even if you use nonviolence and even if you're successful, use nonviolence, that does not mean that no harm will come to you or those you love. That means if harm has come to you and those you love in the past, although you use these kinds of tools, that doesn't mean that you didn't succeed, right? It just means you may have succeeded very well, actually. What these things are supposed to cause in the opponent are very special problems which will disturb or frustrate the effective utilization of his own forces. So the actionist will then be able to apply something like the jujitsu to their opponent, throwing him off balance politically, causing his repression to rebalance against his position. So the mobber's repression to rebound against his position and weakening his power. Furthermore, the remaining non-violent while continuing the struggle, the actions will help improve their own position in several ways. So what is really important there, and that is also something that I read in Mahatma Gandhi's biography. I read a lot of biographies when I was young of politicians and political figures, but also I read Mahatma Gandhi's biography, I read Martin Luther King's biography sometime in my teens, and a little bit later Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. And what I remember from Gandhi's biography especially was that how upset he got when people were starting to get violent because it was completely sabotaging what he was trying to do. At least that is what I remember, 30 years ago or something, a little bit more even. Because a lot of it centers on perception of people, right? And a lot of times bullies or repressive regimes too will want to have a certain appearance in public, and that can be sabotaged by nonviolent action. If you are nonviolent, there should in fact be no dismay or surprise at repression. It is often the result of the opponent's recognition that the nonviolent action is a serious threat to his policy or regime. Nonviolent actionists must be willing to risk punishment as a part of the price of victory. That is something that you will always find, and not always, but if there is a bully around, you will find that once they see that you will resist and that you won't just submit to them, they will redouble their efforts, at least at first. right? That is something you need to be aware of, and that may be the price of defending and winning in the long term. So even if something goes wrong and somebody gets hurt, it may be the price that is to be paid. But if you don't pay it, you may pay a much higher price. Or if you get violent, you may pay a much higher price. That is what he says in this as well. We always think that, okay, non-violence, you're kind of a... Actually, that is what he says. Some people erroneously understand that to mean that non-violent group is helpless. That is not true. The difference in the treatment of the opponent should not lead to the feeling of impotence or frustration, especially if the nonviolent action understands that remaining nonviolent makes it more possible for him to gain increased control over the opponent and reduce the violence against the nonviolent group. So you're actually working for the group, you're not just working for yourself, right? And increase the chances of winning. Even in an environment like, I don't know, an apartment building, for example, when it's not about an oppressive regime, if there's a group of bullies there, if you stand up, it may initially increase the violence against you, or the group may do something against you. But if you then have a coalition with other people who are all also being bullied, then suddenly there can be a sort of balance that is established. And if you make sure that you make public what they do in order to bully people, then suddenly that can be a very good method. Of course, I would never. The problem is with going public and outing people is you don't want to be a telltale, right? And I would never use that as the first strategy. But sometimes it's the only strategy that you have, because they will rely on nobody wanting to tell on them. You know, just as with child abuse in the church a lot of times, because if you're telltale, then you also have, there's a price to pay socially for that. But on the other hand, if you care about others more than yourself, if you care about your pets more than yourself, if you care about some of your neighbors that are also bullied more than yourself, even if you take a couple of hits, it may help your entire group. And that is what I found too, that sometimes people are so afraid that they don't speak up anymore, but then when they see somebody else standing up against the bullies and it actually works, then they find the courage to come out again as well. So that is the idea about that. And then there are different kinds of ways of how to do this. Of course, there is, I'm just looking for something different again from what I just said. There's a whole array of different things that can be used in a political context. Right, and why this works again, instead of mass repression forcing cooperation and obedience, a regime may find that the repression is constantly met by refusal to submit or flee, and repression may repeatedly be demonstrated to be incapable of inducing submission. Furthermore, in extreme cases, his very agency of repression may be immobilized by massive defiance, because at some point people won't follow anymore. You know, the more aggressive you get, the more repressive you get against somebody who obviously doesn't do anything wrong, the least you will be supported by the people around, because they will also feel that, well, this is going a little bit far, and if this comes out and they have supported the person doing it, then it will also affect their reputation, right? So that is sometimes what can help you. Now, there are so many different ways of nonviolent how you can resist, and I'll just read a few of them because it's just so many ways. Just a moment. So it is methods of nonviolent protests. Let me just see if I can minimize this a little bit. Hide notebook. Here we go. Console. Hide notebook. So methods of nonviolent protest and persuasion. I'll just read a few of them there. You can see how much there is. Public speeches, letters of opposition or support, declarations by organizations and institutions, signed public statements, declarations of indictment and intention, group or mass petitions, slogans, caricatures, symbols, banners, posters, display communications, leaflets, pamphlets, books, newspapers and journals, records, radio and advertising, skywriting and earthwriting. Whatever that is, I'll find that out. Deputations, mock awards, group lobbying, picketing, mock elections, displays of flags and symbolic colors, wearing of symbols, prayers of worship, delivering symbolic objects, protest disrobings. Oh, that would be fun. Getting naked. Destruction of own property, symbolic lights, display of portraits, paint as protest, new signs and names. That is the methods of, and there's about as many others. Haunting of, well, okay, I'm not going to say this one. Humorous skits and pranks, performance of plays and music, singing, and so on, so on. I mean, there's so many different ones here. Chapter 4, the methods of social non-cooperation, ostracism of persons, social boycott, selective social boycott, lysistratic non-actions, whatever that is. That sounds like Lysistrata. Right? Do you know that Greek play where the women refuse to sleep with their husbands unless they stop going to war? I don't know if that's what he means here, but I once saw that play in high school and I found it very, very funny. Excommunication, interdict, student strike, social disobedience, withdrawal of social institutions, stay at home, stay at home, okay. Total personal non-cooperation, flight of work, the sanctuary. There's actually something like a reverse strike as well. I'm not entirely sure how that works. I'm going to find that out as well. The methods of economic non-cooperation, economic boycotts, consumer boycotts, policy of austerity, withholding, refusal to rent, national consumers boycott, and so on. That's probably a little bit less interesting to us. Although it depends on, what kind of situation you're in. The strike, there's a quickie walkout, a peasant strike, a farmer's work strike, a craft strike. It depends on what situation you're in, If you're a wife who is protesting against her husband bullying the kids or the animals or the pets, that may also work if he has to wash his clothes himself. Right. The methods of political non-cooperation, withholding or withdrawal of allegiance, refusal of public support, that is something that can work in a neighborhood, for example. Literature and speeches advocating resistance. And we've got the next cat, that one's outside. Just a moment, let me just let him out. Yeah, come on, dear. Now that is, for example, a very good example of non-violent protest. Both of my cats today have had a day today, and I don't know, usually they don't. But both of them have had a day today where they just quietly go meow, 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 meow. At some point you will do what they want. Because otherwise you're just going to go crazy, right? It's just meow, meow, meow. Yeah, I mean, I'm stronger than them. I could bully them if I wanted to, but if I would actually bully the shit out of them, they wouldn't come back. And I love them. I don't want to bully the shit out of them. So I don't. And I'm just quiet. And sometimes they always know when to do this. Like, for example, if I'm talking into a camera, they know that if they want to have something, they just have to make noise now, because they know that I don't like when I'm talking to the camera that they're making noise. Otherwise, they might just be sitting around here. So there are all kinds of non-violent ways to resist or to get your way. So I will read this book. This is a very long book, right? So we are just at chapter 7 here, and with this, and we also have, oh God, there's a whole page of citizens' alternatives to disobedience, actions by government personnel, domestic governmental action, several sub-points under that, international governmental action, several points under that, chapter 8, methods of nonviolent intervention, psychological intervention, self-exposure to the elements. We're getting naked again, I think. The fast or moral pressure, hunger strike, satyagraphic fast, whatever that is. Reverse trial, non-violent harassment. Non-violent harassment. Now that is interesting. A sit-in, a stand-in, a ride-in, a wade-in, a mill-in, a pray-in. Non-violent raids, non-violent air raids. Non-violent air raids, you probably need, well, maybe you can do it with a drone. Non-violent invasion, non-violent interjection, non-violent obstruction. Non-violent occupation, that is interesting. Non-violent occupation, okay. A stall-in, a speak-in, a guerrilla theater. Wow, a guerrilla theater, okay. Overloading of facilities. Non-violent land seizure, how you do that though, I wouldn't be entirely sure. Defiance of blockade, because you kind of have to be violent in order to stand in the way, right? But dumping, okay. So there's a whole lot of stuff here. So I'm going to go through this. I'm going to read through this in the coming months, and I will take out whatever I think could be interesting for this group. And just to give you some ideas of what you may be able to do just in case there is an issue. That is not to use in order to bully your neighbors. This is not to use for any kind of negative kind of pressure on people. This is exclusively, and I'm going to look that this is exclusively for, in order to really promote win-win situations, because you can't promote a win-win situation until when somebody is constantly coming in and constantly attacking you, until you've at least stopped the attack and that person actually listens to you. And then you can promote a win-win situation between all, because otherwise he doesn't listen because he's not interested, right? And that is what it all goes towards. It is not towards starting a war with anyone. It is towards peace. It is towards finding a solution that is best for everyone, including our non-human mates on this planet, our non-human family on this planet. Okay, so this is what is planned for the next few Mondays for the next year, and I hope it's going to be interesting for you. It's certainly going to be interesting for me. Even just reading what is in this book was interesting already, and I hope you will get some nice pieces out of it. So I wish you a very, very happy New Year again if you weren't here yesterday, and bye.